So just a few days ago, we came back from Cedar Point, and we rode Magnum, of course. And the reason I'm bringing this up on a Blackpool Pleasure Beach episode is because when we rode the big one, I was kind of expecting it to maybe even be my favorite of the Aero hypercoasters that we've ridden. And we've ridden 3. We've ridden Desperado, Magnum, XL 200, and of course the big one. No longer presented by Pepsi Max, I don't think. Either way.
It'll always be the Pepsi Max big one to me. But it's really just the big one.
For a second, I was like, is that still part of it? Anyway, I come to the realization that my least favorite is the big one. But the setting for the big one is the prettiest. But I will say I prefer Desperado because Desperado's in the desert. It's kind of apeshit. And it's really like, I think, the best one. And rest in peace. I don't expect anyone to ever ride that thing again. Unless you work for maintenance. And then you have Magnum XL 200, which is kind of crazy. It has a pretty cute setting. It just kind of goes out and back, though. So it's not super creative layout. And then there's a really creative layout for the big one. And it's very pretty next to the ocean, but it feels like it's like a mine train. Like, besides the first drop, I feel like the big one doesn't really do anything.
The first drop is insane.
Speaking of the first drop.
It's so insane they had to rebuild it. Because the first iteration of the first drop started to tear itself apart, and it was hurting people, I think. I'm paraphrasing here. I think it was putting a lot of stress on the ride vehicles and the track itself, and probably the riders. And then they kicked it out a little bit and kind of telescoped the support system out to accommodate a more graduated drop profile, which is amazing when you consider how violent that drop still is, like, regardless.
It's super violent.
And a third party came out and did it. Aero didn't do it. So...
Do you know the name of the third party?
Oh, it's on Roller Coaster Database. The name escapes me. But
because I will say it's pretty wild. If you look at the support structure for it now, we'll have pictures posted online about it. It really, you can tell how they really had to kick out the supports to kind of support the track, almost dangling over the street in order to make that first drop more curved. Kind of reminds me of what they had to do with Viper at Circus Magic Mountain when it originally opened. It was just like a sharp turn on the first drop, and then they had to really kind of kick it out and make it, more rounded. I
thought it was on Roller Coaster Database, but apparently not. I'll look it up. Maybe it's on Wikipedia. But yeah, they had...
Well, what is a Roller Coaster Database is all the other coasters that we're going to be talking about today. So if you do want to follow along, RCDB is a great place. And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
You're listening to an episode of
Coaster Kings Radio.
And today's episode is all about Blackpool Pleasure Beach. This is another installment in our little series we're doing this year. That is the Great British Road Trip. And of course, this installment is Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I'm going to have to say that so often when I misspeak. We have done a couple episodes already. Alton Towers, of course, Thorpe Park. We've done Drayton Manor and Polton Spark. Am I missing any? Flamingo Land. The Flamingo Land already. So check out those episodes. Here are honest opinions about the UK's biggest and supposedly best parks. And we'll tell you whether or not we agree with that. I think actually that the UK's best park is this park. So today we're going to talk about the UK's best park. She's vintage, she's cute, she's seaside. And she's got a really classic collection of bangers.
She's pretty cool.
And while... individually, maybe at this day and age, they're not all as spectacular as maybe like Alton's collection. I still think the overall park's feel and energy is, really, really awesome. I love this park. And we will talk about the coasters, of course, but I think this park is also really important way beyond the coasters. And so I think we should start with some of the activities and rides that are in roller coasters, because some of their biggest highlights are not even coasters.
I call them the extracurriculars. So all these like rides that are like roller coasters, or I guess in this case there is one major water ride, Valhalla, which I really think in this era Valhalla is the ride that Blackpool Pleasure Beach is most famous for. Coaster enthusiasts talk
more famous than like the big one and stuff?
I do think so, because people talk about it like crazy. maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the people I hang out with. But it's like it's so well talked about. And like when I went to Blackpool Pleasure Beach with Ace in 2015, that was the ride everyone was talking about. It was before Icon, granted, but nothing was like a higher priority for the people in my circles than Valhalla, which I think is a great place to start a podcast episode about Blackpool Pleasure Beach, because I think it is one of the coolest rides anywhere, and definitely one of the coolest rides at Blackpool. It is a giant.
See, if it wasn't so wet, I had wished we
I
had ridden it
know, but
again.
it's so wet,
because
uncomfortably wet.
it's such a spectacular, crazy, cool ride. But half the ride, I was just like,
Uncomfortable.
it's almost like a fever dream to me. I remember going through the Ring of Fire. I remember like being really wet in the fog and some animatronics, and it was a massive ride. It took freaking forever to get through. It was really cool, but man, I barely remember anything. I cannot really vividly remember much about like even the layout or any of that, because it was so wet that I was just constantly just like, I was covered in a poncho, and then we just got ultra soaked repeatedly. I don't know. I just remember that being like the biggest attractor, was that like it was just so wet that was almost like the focus for me that I remember the most, even though maybe it's my obsession with not getting wet and then riding Valhalla, which is like the exact opposite of not getting wet. And then
The wettest ride
but the
ever.
ride itself, I do remember it being kind of cool and creepy.
Easily, like the wettest
I remember
ride
there
in
being
Great
some
Britain.
sort of wolf scene.
I think the ride is kind of a fever dream, even if you're not completely overwhelmed by the experience. It's definitely a fever dream, and there's just a lot. There's a lot going on. I'll never understand like what possessed Blackpool Pleasure Beach to build this ride, because it is such a choice to do like a giant, elaborate, indoor themed flume ride that gets you
Like a Disney-sized flume ride, like a massive flume ride.
like Pirates of the Caribbean sized flume ride that gets you incredibly wet. Like it is such a choice, but it's legendary.
Yeah, on the coast of on the western coast of the United Kingdom, It's like, really, we need a super soaker wet ride.
Totally legendary. And at the time, they still had their old log flume, the giant arrow flume, which they chopped to replace with infusion. That at the time I already had quite a few water rides. It was sort of like, okay, like this is an interesting choice. They also had that,
but maybe they knew this was going to be like the
water
ride for the foreseeable
and the other
future.
Water rides were going to go
so they
away.
could cut other water rides, because the other ones wouldn't matter anymore. Also, for those that haven't ridden Valhalla and kind of curious about the boats, for example, if you've been to Parque Warner Madrid, and they have the Intamin kind of like wider log flume.
Yeah, the two abreast Intamin flume system.
So it's that system with those boats. So you do sit side by side. Did I sit next to you, or did I sit next to a stranger?
We were with Martin and Charlotte.
No, I sat next to you.
I think you were next to me.
Yeah, it was 2 and 2. There was 2 girls in front of us. We were row 2. And the girls in front of us got even worse.
The girls in front of us
they weren't even wearing ponchos or anything. Like, thank you to like Dive River Roller Coaster Girl for like giving us ponchos, because I would have probably hated my life without it. Yeah,
because we were not prepared.
I think I was wearing a Toverland one. Yeah, but yeah, overall, definitely memorable just for like the overall feeling of coming off the ride and being kind of like super overwhelmed, like what the hell just happened. And the ride is kind of misleading because you see it and there's a cool facade for it, like a very kind of classic theme parky fake rock facade, I would say. And then the station's very unassuming. You have your switchbacks on the midway and then you have a little station there, and it looks unassuming, almost like fairground unassuming. And then the actual ride is hiding in this massive show building behind it, almost like Disney style, where like you can't see it.
It's a double show building. It's got like a little, like there's a second show building.
Like a bridge between
it's like telescope.
Yeah.
Like it's got the little bridge between it because it's so massive. It is such a massive ride.
Yeah, it's insane how big the ride is. And so it really is kind of unassuming. And even though I've been hearing people talk about Valhalla for decades. Decades, is that possible? For a long time.
Yeah, it
anyway,
opened in 2000. So it's 25 years old.
I didn't quite expect how big it actually was. And I did enjoy that aspect. It's one of the few rides where I kind of remained spoiler free for years. I think I may have watched one POV years ago with you, Alex, and that was about it.
It's not an easy ride to film because it is very dark. Very, very dark. It is
very dark.
It is a dark, dark ride.
And very long.
And
but yeah, All the water effects, all the fire effects. Oh my god, that I remember. There was a bunch of fire especially towards the end, right?
A
the whole
lot
ceiling
of
on
fire.
Is that right?
A lot of fire.
A lot of
Speaking
fire.
of fire trucks just drove by my window. I'm in Denver, and I'm in the middle. I'm in like downtown, and a fire truck just came blaring by. So you might have heard the siren.
In Elitch Gardens
Yes, I took a walk by Elitch Gardens, and there's a trail that goes around the back of the park. So there's great views of a majority of the coasters. I didn't get that good of a view of the Sidewinder though, which is the Kindred roller coaster to Blackpool Pleasure Beach at this park. Actually, there.
Let's not forget the S6E too.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think about that. Wow, there's 2 coasters at Elitch Gardens that have clones at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and maybe a flat ride here or there too. If I think about it long enough, maybe I don't know. But anyways, yeah. So I'm in Denver. You're in the East Bay.
San Jose. And Fremont, and it's like really, really warm,
hot.
which is unusual for the Bay.
I
wish you
wish you
I
were.
was thinking of going to Great America today, but you know what? I needed to sleep more. I was like, think of going this morning, but I was so tired. I slept. I needed that. I need to sleep up for a vacation coming up. It's going to be, I think, our first non-theme park vacation in a very long time.
Our first non-theme park trip to China. Like ever.
First non-theme park trip to Asia ever. That's crazy. Yeah, wow. I guess actual like leisure trip, not work trip. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Anyway, we won't even have a podcast episode about that, so nobody listening will probably care. So anyway, next up we're going to talk about a ride by Next Wave that just relaunched this year.
Oh, that's clever.
Launchpad.
Relaunched.
And relaunched this year. And I don't exactly know what they did to make it like a new ride, but maybe it's just theming just for paint. It. But Launchpad, their SNS tower.
Yeah.
Ran great, looks really fresh just because they repainted it, and I think they just did a lot of cosmetic work on it. Maybe new vehicles. The restraints felt modern,
might be a new,
maybe a new
gondola. This ride famously opened as PlayStation The Ride, which was a follow-up to the Pepsi Max big one. It was a peak era of sponsorships and licensing.
That's quite the sponsorship.
And so the PlayStation, the original Sony PlayStation, which came out in 1994, was making its release in the United States and Great Britain and Europe in 1995. In 1996, this was the first, I believe it was the first SNS tower in Europe. It's just a space shot, nothing crazy. This predates a lot of the like updated like shot and drop technology and combo tower technology. This is like earlier than that. So it opened as PlayStation The Ride. And then once that sponsorship ran out, it became Ice Blast, which I think is a reference to Valhalla, because that whole corner became like the Valhalla area. And like there's a part of Valhalla where it's actually very cold. Like it's like freezing inside. You remember that part where you're in like the cold room?
I just remember, was there a lot of fog?
Yeah.
Was there like
there's a
mist
room
bumped in there?
Valhalla
like actual
that's like,
water
it's
vapor?
very cold, like a genuine, like a freezing room. But it's,
See, I feel so terrible. I feel so poorly prepared for this episode because Valhalla to me, again, this is a fever dream. I like remember
I've
bits
only
and pieces.
ridden it
Most
twice
of it, it's just me
in
like
10 years.
It was kind of scary too. Was it?
It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
It's
very scary. When you spoilers, and you do that, the final double drop, and then you dive through the ring of fire, like a proper. There's like water, like there's fire on the water.
Dolphin in the 80s
it's
dolphin
like
show?
Phantasmic. It's like Phantasmic the ride. There's like all this oil on the water, and it's on fire, and then there's like a little ring that your boat goes just tears right through it, and you're literally surrounded by fire in 360 degrees.
Yeah, that's the part I remember the most. Being kind of sketched out by all of it.
I've only ridden, like I've literally in my entire life, I've ridden it twice. Once in 2015 and once with you, and both times it was like a truly terrifying moment. Like a carnal fight or flight screaming moment of like, oh my God, this feels really unsafe. Like, can they do this to people? Is this like appropriate? But apparently it's fine. But anyways.
Anyway, back to Launchpad. Cute little ride. They had some sort of fog effect or smoke effect that happens right before you lift off, and then you kind of drag the smoke up with you. That's kind of fun. I mean, it's just an SNS tower, but it runs
like classic.
It runs well. nothing
Dr.
too
Doom's
spectacular.
fearful behavior with the smoke effect.
But in parks like that, it is nice to have flat rides because I feel like when I think about the park, of course, I think about some of the classic rides that are not coasters, like some of the dark rides, and then of course the coasters is all I really think about. But it's nice to have, a good selection of flat rides, which in the UK is surprisingly kind of rare. I feel like in the Netherlands, I feel like all the parks are mostly flat rides and maybe a coaster or a few coasters. Maybe not the super big parks, but then the UK parks we did, it was just like coaster, 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 and not a whole lot of flat rides. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah,
or am
no,
just
I
crazy?
agree with you. I mean, part of it is like we're traveling and we're going these long distances and we're not necessarily going to ride flat rides and stuff that we
Not really
can
focusing
ride
on the
in the
flats,
States. We
yeah.
rode the launch pad because we had like 2 minutes before the park closed or something. Like we hopped onto
true,
the
we just
flying
ran to the
machine,
queue,
which we'll talk about that next. We hopped onto the flying machine and we got off and there was like 2 minutes left and and Martin was like, well, let's just ride the launch pad. And so we rode it because it's a new ride and it was great. It was really fun. It was, those are always fun. Great views, great view of the park. Great view of Blackpool. But yeah, so not some.
And
Go
then, go ahead.
I was just saying,
I was gonna say the flying machines.
flying machines are.
I like flying machines. That's a super, 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 super
Yeah, it's
classic.
it's the oldest operating ride in the park right now. Technically, the River Caves, Tunnel of Love, Old Mill ride is older, but it's not operating right now. It's under refurbishment. We don't know when it's going to reopen. Hopefully, it reopens. But
at least it's on the park's
that's the
website, so
oldest
it's gonna
ride,
reopen.
and then the
I guess
flying
I've
machine is the oldest operating
announced
ride.
when.
And it was served, I think, for Americans. It might be more famous not for itself, but for the inspiration it served for the Golden Zephyr at California Adventure.
That's why I was so excited, because I've ridden, of course, the Golden Zephyr California Adventures Paradise Gardens area, and I'd never ridden one of the actual classic ones, and so riding that was really
that
cool.
was the source material. If you're wondering what possessed Disney to build this ride, it's Blackpool Pleasure Beach still having their original. It's over 100 years old, this ride. It's still intact and still spinning. And
the ride's quite simple. You're really hanging from these like rocket-shaped aerodynamic rods that are connected by two cables, one in the front, one in the back, and you just swing out over part of the midway in a big circle, and the faster the tower rotates, the faster you swing around it and the higher you go. And you don't expect you to fly around at any sort of real decent height, but you do swing out away from the platform for a bit. And that's it. The ride is pretty benign, but it's good. I'm glad that we.
It's very pleasant, and it's kind of nice to air out a little bit after your ride on Valhalla, which is what I remember that too. My ride. I've only ever ridden this ride like kind of wet, like wet from Valhalla. I don't think we got right in line for it after Valhalla. I think we had like more time during the day, but we were still damp. When I rode it in 2015, we came right off of Valhalla. We were sopping wet, like dripping wet. And the something about the ride, this like the wind chill of being on the ride, like was very comforting in the very sopping wet state.
Yeah, I liked it. Yeah, though when we rode it, we weren't wet. Because we rode it, we had already been. I guess we may have still been a little bit wet.
Damp.
We
weren't wet. We rode Valhalla as soon as it opened, which was like at 2.
Yeah, because it did open late. Yeah,
and then
2
we
p.m.
did.
And then I don't think we rode
flying machine
except for a few minutes
later.
before 7 p.m.
But
right?
like our laps were still wet. Like our pants were wet. There's no truly getting away
from Valhalla
from the wet of Valhalla.
And then so close to that, we rode the Derby Racers, which has a really classic organ playing inside. And had a good friend / colleague that is really into like those organs.
Carousel organs, yes.
Carousel organs. And so I kind of wanted to ride just to send him a photo of it. But also, his ride is mad sketch, for the record, because when you're on the Derby Racers, you're not strapped in or anything.
Yep.
And these horses get a lot of movement at a lot of speed. I thought I was going to fly off to the side. Like, it was actually kind of scary. Would you agree?
It's terrifying. I felt this way about the Cedar Point one, too, which I rode. And
I've never done a Cedar Point one, actually. I've actually never done a Cedar Point one.
I thought we rode it the first time in 2019.
No,
okay.
I've never been on it.
Well, next time we'll...
Speaking of which, guys, Cedar Point episode last week, check it out.
That was a good one.
We
That was one of
completely
our best
changed our
episodes,
whole name, our whole
if
vibe
I
on
do
it.
say
I
so
think
myself. We had a
like
really nice.
it's literally called yeah, it's literally called I guess to see the point fanboys now, if it tells you anything, because holy crap, I feel like after 5 years of no visits to Cedar Point, our entire mentality and vibe of every single ride pretty much switched and changed. So definitely check that out. Anyway, back to the Derby Racers.
I just love this ride, and so there's only 3 left in the world, as far as I know. The third one is at Rye Playland in Rye, New York, which is upstate New York, not far from New York City. And I think that one is operating right now. That I don't know. The Rye Playland, like that place is kind of going through it, but like that's also home to the Dragon Coaster, which is like one of the sibling coasters of the Santa Cruz and San Diego Giant Tippers. So, and it's not open right now. It's under maintenance. They've had a rough go of it this decade, ever since COVID. But I digress. That there's only 3 of these Derby racer carousels left. Cedar Point has one, and I think the one at Blackpool is just in beautiful shape. It has like a disco ball, like glass panel motif to it, so it's like very sparkly. And yeah, it's just cool. Like, it's cool if you've never been on one. The horses used to like bob, like they would kind of like bob back and forth in relationship to each other. I think all of them have that feature turned off, and the horses they just go up and down. They don't go forward and back, just because that's like a difficult component of a ride to maintain. But just a beautiful ride and so cool. And another ride that is over 100 years old. The number of rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach that are over 100 years old is pretty crazy. And there's 2 right next to each other, the Flying Machine and the Derby Racer. Just a beautiful.
You know what? That's one of those things. It's like if this park can be like nicely maintained and feel classic and vintage while really not feeling like it's in poor shape at all. Like I thought the park was actually in quite nice shape. And then I feel like there's no excuse to some of these other British parks that are much newer with much newer additions to just be so poorly maintained. Speaking mostly of like how whatever Merlin decides to do with the park, but the parks, lack of consistency, that kind of stuff. Because even though there's so many different kinds of rides at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, the whole park as a whole feels very cohesive and consistent and vintage. And like that whole seaside amusement park, I almost think of like Coney Island era, of course. Same time when seaside amusement parks all over the world were popping up. That whole vibe is still very alive, and they kind of play into the whole retro feel to it, and like the Art Deco chrome aesthetics that they were using back in the day. This park just keeps that alive, and I just want to mention that thought before I forget to mention it later. But that's just one of the reasons I think why it's the UK's probably best theme park, because keeping 100-year-old flat rides alive, stuff like that, or like dark rides, this is such an expensive and such a commitment, to the park, that's just something I respect that so much about Pleasure Beach.
And it's a tough job. Like, Pleasure Beach goes through a lot of the same trials that Kennywood goes through, where like it's hard to do anything right. Like, I know people are really pissed every time Blackpool Pleasure Beach retires a ride. I mean, when they retired the Wild Mouse, that was hard. Like, that was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. I rode the Wild Mouse and I thought it was really cool, but I thought it was super violent and intense and honestly a huge liability. And I was doing some research on the Wild Mouse leading up to this episode, and I learned about how like they tried to do some improvements on the ride in 2017 to kind of like keep the ride, functional. They did some changes like with the brakes, and it had a lot of downtime and a lot of issues. And I think what happened was the ride just ran into too many problems, and like so much of that ride was not up to code. It was all grandfathered in, so like the ride is just not like it was built in 1958, and so it had been running for almost 60 years. And there was just things about it where I'm just like, I can't believe this ride's open. Like, it's really cool, it's really fun, but like people on my trip, like you like riding with 2 people was super sketchy because you were super inclined to like hit your head, like your nose on the person in front of you. And like one person on the trip like really hurt their nose doing that. Somewhere along the way, they added seatbelts so that you could safely, theoretically, ride the mouse by itself. But even then, like all of my rides were by myself. And even then it was just seemed like really sketchy. Like there was a part on the lift hill where the clearance was so low that like you really had to duck. And if you didn't duck, like you would come pretty close to hitting your head on a beam. Like if you had ridden it, you really it would have been your responsibility to duck on the lift hill
See, that's
to not
wild. Yeah.
get like a little tap on the head from the crowd, like a beam from a turn on the right. So like stuff like that. I'm like, okay, like, do I love this ride? Was it super badass? Like, sure, but this is a business. Like, is it realistic for something like this ride to run when it's a liability, when it's a time bomb?
I'm also just not really looking for like liability kind of rides
Mm.
personally, though. Like, I'm not a big fan of the idea that I could actually get seriously harmed if I don't
Like
pay close
I
attention.
liked
Like,
the
I
ride
know
a
that
lot, but
it's my
everyone's like, "Oh, it's my,
responsibility
the best ride.
partially,
There's my
but
favorite ride." I'm like, it wasn't for me because for me it was like it was fun, but it was really stressful. It was stressful, and I was wondering if I was going to hurt myself or pull a muscle or hit myself on a joint or something, like bruise my knee or like bang my elbow or something. Um, which I mean, all of this to say that was still a really cool ride, and you can still ride some. There's two wooden wild mouse coasters in Indonesia and one at Luna Park in Sydney. But none of them were as aggressive as this one. This one was. It used to just be the basic like zigzag mouse layout. Somewhere along the way, I think in the 70s, they expanded the mouse to give it like a big first drop and like a fan curve, and then it meets up with like the original layout. So they expanded it, but like that ride just hauled ass through everything, and it just felt like I was riding something that was not like I can handle. I'm a coaster guy. We're coaster guys. We can handle it. But the average person, just some random person, like getting in line for this and riding it, it's a lot. Like it's a lot to expect of a normal person to just ride this and like tolerate it because it's aggressive. It can
yeah.
hurt you. So all that to say, it's like, yeah, Blackpool is under a tremendous amount of stress to keep everything open and perfect and also build new rides in a landlocked park. So it's just not.
And I mean, if you want your thrill of being able to be thrown off a ride, there's plenty of them that are like still thrilling and scary like that, like the Racer Derby, or their Derby racers, or we'll talk about steeplechase in a little bit. There's plenty of rides at this park where you can be like seriously harmed.
Yeah.
So like losing Wild Mouse wasn't even the only seriously kind of dangerous ride left in the park. Next, I kind of want to talk about some of the dark rides this park has, because this park is like super classic in many ways, including dark rides. And the next ride really in line here, location wise, is actually Alice in Wonderland, which, if I'm not mistaken, the park actually literally went to Walt Disney and asked if they were able to do a Alice in Wonderland ride in a very similar vein, because they loved the ride so much in Anaheim and Disneyland, the original. And so Walt Disney granted them permission. I'm sure there were royalties paid. I'm sure there was actually an official line, unlike in many other European parks that actually just copied Disney and never ever paid them for it.
Great Yarmouth Pleasure Beach snail ride.
Yeah, it sounds like this was actually an approved Alice in Wonderland ride, and this one feels so classic and so intimate and very different because it hasn't gone through a million upgrades with actual IP kind of aesthetics that Disney has used. It feels very much like a Blackpool version of it. But this was actually one of our favorite rides we rode that day.
This ride's very special. If you love Roller Coaster Tycoon, you'll recognize this ride from the Cheshire Cat ride vehicles that you can put on the car ride. So this ride, yes, it was partially inspired by Disneyland's Alice in Wonderland ride, which opened in 1958 and was designed by Walt Disney and Aerodynamics. For this ride, they loved it. It was such a great ride. They were like, well, we want to do one too. Aerodynamics built this ride as well as the original Disneyland ride. This one, the source material is the illustrations for the original Lewis Carroll book, the original Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass books written by Lewis Carroll, who's a British author. So it was like a happy, like, I don't think Disney was ever even, it wasn't really even Disney's place to say one way or the other, because the ride was always, the source material was always the books for the Blackpool ride, whereas Disney's version, of course, is like very directly referencing the film version. I love both of them. It's hard to choose a favorite. I guess I would have to lean toward the Blackpool one. because the Blackpool one hasn't changed very much over the years. It's had some updates over the years, but it opened in like 1962. It was early 60s. And not much about that ride has changed over the years. Like you said, the one in Disneyland has seen a lot of updates. There were changes made to the outdoor portion of the ride.
Yeah, then they even add to the ride by taking part of the maintenance
Yes,
out
it
and
was
like making
expanded
more,
at one
right?
point
Which
too
is crazy.
to give
Yeah.
the unbirthday finale at the end of the
Scene.
ride.
Yeah.
So that one has seen a lot of changes. Even in recent years with like technical upgrades and projection upgrades and stuff like that. Whereas Blackpool's
Yeah, so riding a super
Mhm.
classic version, that was really fun. It was actually one of the highlights of the trip for me.
Absolutely.
I really
What a
enjoyed
great
it.
ride. It's so cute. What else do we have? I mean, this is a great dark ride park.
We have the Ghost
Ghost
Train right
Train.
next to it, because the Ghost Train, which
Is
may
it a
or may not
credit?
be a credit. I mean, it goes uphill.
I count it,
and
but
the credits goes
I think
uphill.
I'm pretty generous
Yeah, I
about
count it.
credits. Like if somebody counts something, I'm like, okay, like sure, I'll count it. Unless it's a Zamperla disco, I'm fairly I'm fairly inclined to count it because like I just am inclined to sympathize with people's logic when they say like, oh, this is a coaster because of X, Y, and Z. I'm like, oh yeah, I see that. Okay, I'll count it too. So like I've never had any reason not to count the Ghost Train. What do you think of the Ghost Train?
I'm usually not a big fan of these kind of hokey little dark rides that are themed to like being scary, because those little effects like they do, like little pop-out effects and the little animatronics and whatever like loud metal banging thing they can come up with, I'm not usually a big fan. I do remember liking this one a lot, but whenever I ride these, and maybe it's because I got really scarred in the one I rode at Phare de Tron in Paris.
Oh yeah,
at the fair, where this guy came out and like was like literally using a chainsaw on a piece of metal and it was like sparking, and like
I remember you telling me that story.
Like, it was not
I
even
wasn't
cute.
there,
and I was so scared.
but it was
so now
a great
I'm like
story.
now I'm like always like kind of like when you go to like a Halloween maze at the theme park and you're like waiting for the jump scares and kind of antsy. That's me the entire ride. So I don't know how much I love these rides, but I did like this one. It was very pretty and it was very.
It was a little
pleasing.
hokier than I
roller
remember.
coaster drop in it.
All the little scenes and vignettes were very like individual like jump gags. I kind of wish they would.
Yeah, they were very much. There was no.
I wish they would update it a little bit and like give it like an arc, like a story arc. I feel like it feels a little cheap inside.
Yeah.
It has such great potential, but then again, that's like part of the gags. That's part of the charm of the ride is that it is this goofy ride with no story or anything. It's just an aesthetic, and you're just there to get spooked by things, hydraulic little animatronics and shit like jumping out at you. So it's a great ride in any case. That's another ride that's like almost 100 years old, and another ride that that is the source material for the ride inclusion on Roller Coaster Tycoon. I loved building ghost trains in Roller Coaster Tycoon because when they went down drops, they kept their momentum, unlike car rides, but you either had to put brakes.
Yeah, if we built a turn after,
yeah,
it would crash,
you
right?
had to make sure that they didn't take a turn too hard, or they would fly off the track and explode.
Yeah, that's just wild. And then the other dark ride that we did,
Wallace and Gromit.
Let me just double check my list. Yes.
Yeah, that's the only other. I keep thinking like, Valhalla. We talked about Valhalla. It's also the water ride.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the water ride, and it's also a dark ride. But it's like, as far as dark rides go.
I mean, talk about a ride I couldn't understand. Wallace and Gromit. So confusing.
So you've never seen a Wallace and Gromit film, right?
Maybe I have as a little kid though, but
I
have not.
I've seen Chicken Run, which was done by the same studio, and may or may not take place in the same universe as Wallace and Gromit. I'm not actually sure, but I've never seen a Wallace and Gromit film, and all of the sequences and scenes are direct film references, and it's not like its own story. It's more like a potpourri of references to the various like 4 or 5 theatrical Wallace and Gromit films. So for us, it was just kind of happening, and it was cute. But I was expecting a story. I was expecting it to go somewhere.
Yeah, it just felt like a bunch of different.
It was all just things happening, like very matter of factly, without any continuity. And I was like, okay, like whatever. But a cool ride.
I guess the biggest thing about this ride is the coolest thing is that like, you start kind of on, I would say that Pleasure Beach almost is like a 2-level kind of park layout. And this ride all takes place like underneath where the ride starts. So you kind of do really go down into, the dungeons of this ride, which kind of reminds me of like the boardwalk here in Santa Cruz.
Totally.
Where the dark rides also go down and, and the underlevel
the show
of the
building
park,
is hiding in
park.
plain sight. You're walking on top of it.
Yeah, there's restaurants on top of it, all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of cool to me because it really felt like I can understand how it was a mine-themed ride before because it really kind of does feel like you're going into all these little like tunnels and little.
It feels like
corridors
I think
and passages.
The location, the darkness, like genuine darkness of it, and the fact that you were underneath the midway lends itself to that original theme inspiration. The original ride opened in 1971. It was like you said, the minecart ride. And when it was re-themed, it was reskinned to Wallace and Gromit. The ride received new vehicles. The old vehicles are, some of them you can still go and visit today at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. They've been upcycled into flower beds, which is, some people probably have mixed feelings about this. I think it's great. Maybe because I love flowers, but
if that's how they get to live on, I mean, that's kind of cute. Like, come on, like that's still like
this
heritage.
Is like a super like this is a tangent, but like so this week, Busch Gardens Tampa announced that their log flume Stanley Falls is being retired, which is very sad. That ride ran for 50 years. It's a good ride. It's not the best flume in the world. I don't think it's like the best example of an aero flume, but it's a cute ride and it's a nice. It served a good purpose. It served an important purpose in the lineup for Blackpool. Or Blackpool for Busch Gardens, and I hope that it gets replaced with another water ride because now Busch Gardens is down to just Congo River Rapids. But I sincerely hope they take a page from the Blackpool Pleasure Beach book of upcycling and repurpose the barrel logs, which are very unique aerodynamics, barrel-themed log flume vehicles, originally made specifically for the Busch Gardens in Van Nuys. For their log flume, and then the other Busch Gardens parks when they added both Busch Gardens Williamsburg and Busch Gardens Tampa opened log flumes in 1975. Obviously, Tampa's and then Williamsburg opened with the park. That was an opening day attraction for them. So both of those flumes received the barrels. The Scoot ended up getting log flume boats in addition to that. So like they have like a mix of boats and barrels. But I digress. I hope that we see the barrel boats repurposed in Busch Gardens Tampa as flower beds, especially in that part of the park with like the lorikeets and the kangaroos and stuff where it's all gardens anyway. I would love to see the barrel boats be repurposed into flower beds the way that Blackpool Pleasure Beach did with the minecart vehicles after the ride, the minecart dark ride was reskinned as the Wallace and Gromit Floromatic. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. So that's a cool ride for the park. And the next ride is just a train that I want to talk about. The train's actually very scenic. It feels also incredibly RCT because when you go around the park, this is practically like, it feels like every other ride was just built on top of it. It feels like every ride was just built on top of this train. And the train's layout is quite fascinating because you kind of have like 2 loops. Am I getting that correct? Where like you pass by the station. There's an upper loop
and a lower loop.
You come around.
It's kind of like a big like C
small,
shape.
Right? Yeah. Great little ride because if you want to take photos of the coasters or you want to just get incredibly close to the coasters,
we took some fun videos on
everything
that.
is just, you can practically touch the rides, which is crazy. It's not very well maintained, though. I will say, it felt like some of the theming in the back corners, like the safari theming. I was like, this is kind of embarrassing
all
a little
stuff
bit.
By the Chinese puzzle maze. Oh, that's a good segue. We have to talk about the Chinese puzzle maze too.
Speaking of which, the Chinese puzzle maze is one of our final pieces in our RCT comparison that I like to go on. And so first of all, for those who love Roller Coaster Tycoon, which I'm pretty sure most listeners here have definitely played Roller Coaster Tycoon. So Roller Coaster Tycoon has that Bumbly Beach scenario, which I think was called something else in the European version.
Beach in the UK and Europe.
So that is a quite literal scenario for Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And even the houses that you have in the game are inspired by the houses that are behind the park. And Blackpool
Could you imagine living in one of those houses and being like, my house is in Roller Coaster Tycoon as a piece of scenery.
The game. Right? That's hilarious. God. You can, So then the actual park is also, of course, very roller coaster tycoon adjacent. Not just because there's rides that have been literally been recreated in roller coaster tycoon, but also just because that era of British theme parks is really what inspired the game on many levels. So one of the things you have in the game, of course, is the maze, and so the Chinese puzzle maze is a really cute, dainty little bug infested, by the way, little maze
the
that
real
is in
hedges with
between
real bugs.
between the turnaround on the Nickelodeon Streak and then the turnaround of Steeplechase, which is all very scenic and pretty, and in the
It
middle
is
of it is a
really
maze.
cool.
And it is really cool. It is cute. It's classic. It's dainty. And then the exit of it is along some brick wall next to the houses, and then you pop out over where the old indoor coaster used to be.
Oh,
but
yeah,
the whole thing
Space
feels
Invader.
incredibly roller coaster tycoon. Super roller coaster tycoon.
There is so much at Blackpool Pleasure Beach and Alton Towers. Pretty much, if it was at one of those two parks, that was what dictated what the programmers, what Chris Sawyer for Roller Coaster Tycoon felt was necessary to make the game. So
it's very British
everything,
game,
the bobsled coaster, Blackpool Pleasure Beach, inverted coaster, Nemesis, the vertical coaster, Oblivion, everything from the Cheshire Cat cars to the hedge maze to the steeplechase coaster, wooden wild mouse coasters. All of that was simply dictated out of a desire to faithfully recreate these parks as scenarios in Roller Coaster Tycoon. Because in the original Roller Coaster Tycoon, there were 3 real world scenarios: Heide Park in Germany, and then Blackpool and Alton Towers. So to this day, you can go to Blackpool Pleasure Beach and Alton Towers to a lesser extent, but especially Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and get your entire Roller Coaster Tycoon life being there. And the puzzle maze is a great example of that, especially when you go right in the middle of the puzzle maze. There's a little tower you can walk up into, and you poke your head through, and you're right in the middle of the turnaround, not just for the wooden coaster, the Nickelodeon Streak, but also the steeplechase. You're just surrounded.
And you're eye level with
so
Steeplechase.
cool.
So you can
It's
take
really
some
cool.
cute photos of it coming by. Yeah. So that will round up our non-roller coaster part of the podcast. And now we're going to dive headfirst into some crazy rollies.
To be fair, I would say
nobody says that.
Half of Blackpool's lineup are these non-coaster rides that are worth talking about, for the record. So, more power
So
to
we just
her.
discussed that Nickelodeon Streak kind of circles around. Nickelodeon Streak, it sounds kind of modern because the word Nickelodeon attached to it, and they painted the whole damn thing orange, but it's a super, super classic wooden coaster. And we're going to discuss the wooden coasters first, because wooden coasters at this park are just part of the legacy of the super vintage park. And so there's 4 major wooden coasters here, all of which are old as hell.
Super fucking old.
At this point,
but only the Big Dipper.
At this point,
the Big Dipper is 102. The others are not quite 100 yet.
Which is super freaking old. Anyway, so I'm not realizing that I'm never going to armchair Imagineer this park, because there's nothing I would really want to lose here. But I do think in a park that's this vintage, I feel like it is time for a GCI Woody. I think if they ever have the room for it, which you can get creative with GCI Woodies, let's face it. I think a very modern Woody would actually complement this lineup very well, without sacrificing an old Woody.
Because this park used to be a 5 wooden coaster park, and ever since they cut Wild Mouse, when you just now when you said it had 4 wooden coasters, I was like, 4, not 4.
Oh yeah, for you, yeah.
And now I would like for them to have 5 again, because they had 5 wooden coasters for over almost 60 years. They were a 5 wooden coaster park, and now they're down to 4.
And I feel like they could fit it. I mean, you can get so creative with a wooden coaster. You can fit it pretty much anhere. I think they should build a GCI Woody at some point.
I do love that idea. Yeah.
Right? That'd be kind of
cute.
Little gold
Harry
striker
Traber
for them.
inspo, but make it really wild. Really highlight what those single bench cars can do. Those single bench trains.
And first of all, Millennium Flyer trains are kind of retro in their design anyway, because they're inspired by those super old trains that ran on the Cyclone over in Coney Island. So they're inspired by
Crystal
that
Beach
era
Cyclone.
of wooden coasters.
That's what they were inspired by.
Crystal Beach. So they already have a classic look to them, and you can make those trains beautifully classic. Build a station that has that turn of the century kind of, honestly, 1920s, roaring 20s, seaside, Art Deco kind of vibe, just like Big Dipper has, for example. And then just make it white. I don't care. Make it white. And as you can make, I think GCI could come in and make a super vintage looking, high energy, modern thrill ride that just matches the park's vibe. In fact, I'm going to call GCI after we hang up on this episode.
Call them.
And suggest,
I know you've got them on speed dial. Let them know.
Speed dial.
And tell them, stick with the Millennium Flyers. No Infinity Flyers.
Oh, yeah. Infinity Flyers, never in Infinity ever again. Just why, by the way? Like, off topic, but why? Anyway, so honorable mention to the Grand National. Yes. I didn't get to ride it because she was under maintenance. She's reopened since, but she was under maintenance.
She was not ready for a visit. I'm really grateful for the window of time that we went to Europe or to the UK, because the weather was great and the crowds were really light and like all the parks were open and like even weekdays and stuff. Like we kicked ass on that trip. We got really lucky, but there were a few parks where like not everything was quite ready for the season because it was so early in the season. Blackpool Pleasure Beach's ride that was not ready for us was the Grand National. Although it was more than just the off-season maintenance. Like there was concerns that the Grand National may not reopen. Like there was concern. There was rumors. You remember that? There were rumors that the ride was going to get demolished, which seems.
Oh really? I didn't really hear that.
Yeah, personally, it was getting posted that people were like, into that. This, that, and so. And of course, it was all. I mean, I like to think it was all completely unfounded BS, but in 2025, nothing is sacred. We were there. They were actively working on the ride when we were there, which was a huge relief. I remember really liking it. It was my least favorite of the wooden coasters. It was the one that, like, despite its presence and like the uniqueness of the Mobus Loop layout, it was the one that stood out to me the least. Part of that is because it does not have the original trains. It runs 3-bench PTC trains, which are lovely in their own right, but it's because the original trains for the Grand National were damaged in a fire, during which the station was also damaged severely and was partially rebuilt, and then received some alterations. It had already received alterations for the Pepsi Max big one, the far turnaround for the big one. And then it caught, I want to say it was like 2001 or 2002, they had a fire in the station and it damaged the original trains. So PTC did a beautiful job with these new trains, but it just it's weirdly, uncannily similar to the situation with the Racer at Kennywood. You have a park with 3 vintage, like Roaring 20s wooden coasters. Both of these parks have the 2 remaining Mobus Loop wooden coasters in the world. Both of them are running semi-modern PTC trains because, for whatever reason, the original trains were retired. Grand National is a fire. I don't know what happened with Kennywood's original trains, but I digress. I look forward to going back to Blackpool with you and riding them at some point because I think Grand National is here for a long, long time. It was a pity to miss them, but it also, like I said, it's a likable ride. But I still think Nickelodeon Streak, Big Dipper, Wild Mile. So like those rides really left a really lasting impression.
And so next, I want to discuss the smaller one. So first of all, you have Blue Flyer. And the reason that they're named this is because the Nickelodeon stuff. I don't know if Blue Flyer has a Nickelodeon tie-in. Of course, Nickelodeon Streak does. But Blue Flyer is a tiny little family. It's just because blue is complementary to orange. And that's just like they wanted to paint them opposite. It's not Blue's Clues?
Maybe. Okay. I'm accepting the headcanon that it's Blue's Clues.
I have questions
Blue's Clues
here.
related. I love that. My theory was that they just painted it blue so that it would stand out from the orange streak and it would make sure that guests were aware that there were 2 coasters.
I mean, it's a cute little family coaster. I feel like if you're familiar with the Paramount parks, now actually in the current Six Flags parks, if you're familiar with their little wooden coasters, like the Scooby-Doo wooden coasters,
the family PTC coasters,
then that's kind of the vibe that it gives. Except for it's like ancient, it's very old, and once upon a time, it was considered a big coaster.
Has its
now
original
it's not anything. Now it's like a little child's coaster.
They're very cute little upholstered trains, little kind of Art Deco.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a tight fit, so they still kind of hurt. But then, if you're going to talk about comfortable, classic, red velvet seated coasters, you think it's going to be a masterpiece in Art Deco. Unfortunately, that has been kind of stripped of it, and now it's Nickelodeon themed. But anything to keep the classic alive, I guess, because she's popular.
Takes.
So she has 4 bench trains. Classic, is it PTC?
It is.
A super old trains.
These are
and
ancient.
They're velvet lined up. I don't even believe they have a divider in between the seats.
No.
Thank God. Maybe they do. I'm not sure.
No. No way. No.
Anyway, they're super comfortable, and the trains have kind of like an Art Deco aesthetic, very retro, except for now that they're bright green and orange again because Nickelodeon sponsorship for Nickelodeon theme.
That train,
but she does
for
run
the
really
Orange
well.
Streak is actually the 3rd Big Dipper train. They took it off of the Big Dipper and gave it to Orange Streak. Orange Streak's original trains had nothing. It was a seatbelt and a handlebar. Basically like the Jackrabbit at Kennywood. It was all static. It was a static bar system. And it was your responsibility to hold on and stay seated. But this was prior to my visit in 2015. They had taken one of the Big Dipper trains and remodeled it and repurposed it for the Orange Streak. I think that was like when they did the Orange Streak remodel to make it more like family friendly and like family appropriate. They were like, okay, we're gonna give this ride like a lap bar, like something. We're gonna make this like at least appear safer for our target audience, so that like when they slap Nickelodeon's name on it, it's not this ride that is like a time bomb. Just like Wild Mouse.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great ride. Do you agree? Like, it's not nothing. It is a forceful...
Oh, I agree. I like it a lot better. So let it be known I'm not a big Woody person. So I think maybe people that have been following Coaster Games for the last, like, decade
I'm the wooden coaster guy.
I'm just not a big Woody person.
Unless we're at Park Warner Madrid.
He's the wooden coaster guy. And I am, like in Europe, I think it may be Swiss. But I'm just, generally speaking, I'm not the wooden coaster person. And if you're gonna put me on an old coaster, PTCs, generally speaking, I'll be completely chill, not even riding it. Like last week when we rode Blue Streak, I just rode it because Alex. I know it's not Alex wants to ride it, so we rode Blue Streak. But
You're
I could
very
have skipped
supportive.
it.
I appreciate that.
I'm not generally speaking a PTC wooden coaster kind of like person. Of course, I want to ride every credit and I want to get the classics. But what's nice about the ones at Blackpool Pleasure Beach is that they are very well maintained, first of all. Second of all, they are so classic, and the trains they run, for example, having the 4 bench trains also allows you to pick 2 rows where you're not in a wheel seat, which is something I prefer to do. And so we rode this coaster a couple times, and I really would say that I really did enjoy it. It ran pretty well. There was decent airtime. It felt classic, but I was at no point was I in pain, and that's just what I'm looking for at this point. I don't want my knees bashed against some screw in the seat in front of me. I don't want a seat divider to like crush my hips to the point where I can't walk out of the train afterwards. Like, believe it or not, these are things that have happened on poorly maintained coasters that run PTC trains, and I'm happy to be in the wrong row. So it's nice that the Nickelodeon Streak was so pleasant. And so was Big Dipper. I don't know if you're ready to move into Big Dipper yet, but Big Dipper is, of course, like the icon
Big
of
Dipper
the park,
is
still in a way.
I think my favorite coaster there. It was my favorite in 2015. It was my 600th coaster, and
I remember you telling me that it was incredibly painful and rough. And I remember Martin and Charlotte were also like, "Oh man, this thing runs like a car crash."
Like it is pulling itself apart. Like you can feel.
Yeah, and the shimmying is insane.
But like, oh my god, what a rambunctious!
Oh my god, we rode
party
it twice.
Barge. It is the party bus. It is the party barge.
So we rode it in, second or third row of each car, meaning we didn't ride a wheel seat. And honestly, an incredibly pleasant ride. And because this ride really interacts with the park a lot, you go through tunnels, you go around the big one, you go near Steeplechase, Icon.
Once you start hitting the perimeter of the park and it starts like leaning to the left and gradually making its way around, I'm in heaven. I love it.
And of course, this is also the ride that was built in Roller Coaster Tycoon, so it's kind of cool. And this is also the ride at the park that has the most of the original 20s Art Deco aesthetic. And of course, when you think Art Deco, you think, generally speaking, you would think of North America, particularly New York, Los Angeles, kind of like the Roaring 20s United States is where Art Deco, not to be like an architecture here, but I feel like Art Deco is like the true original American architecture style. America doesn't really have its own architecture style. It's always been copying from previous civilizations, but Art Deco came along, and it was kind of like a 20s Americana thing. maybe even older than that. Anyway, and it kind of transferred over to all these seaside parks around the world because Coney Island was so heavily, of course, involved in the Art Deco scene because it's New York. And so, long story short, that transferred over to Blackpool, and that aesthetic still lives. But if there's one ride in that entire park that just like breathes that aesthetic, it's the Big Dipper. And the Big Dipper Central Tower, which you go around after the lift hill, it's like a giant, almost like a tulip-like statue out of wood that has like chrome covering over it. And then the track is actually part of that statue, and then the end of the tower, you just drop off of it, right? And so that whole aesthetic is so unique and so iconic. And despite it almost not being visible from anywhere, because the big one is actually all around the park, it doesn't feel as present anymore. But you can just sense that once upon a day, you'd show up to Blackpool 100 years ago, and you would stare at this, this
like
Art Deco statue that was also a roller coaster,
Like,
and then like and at the bottom of the tower is actually the station and the turnaround into the first little lift. And so like it's almost like a double decker element that's also a statue.
The fountain in the station.
There's a fountain within
that. My God.
And it's all chrome.
It's
so
like
that
amazing.
whole thing is like an Art Deco, like a giant Art Deco statue that's also like a wooden roller coaster that's 100 years old. So despite the layout not really being anything much, it is such a cool ride, and it's so Pleasure Beach.
The layout goes under walkways, it goes into the dirt, it goes over the midways. You were like over.
Is she an original terrain, Woody?
Icon, you're under Steeplechase, you're around the big one. I mean, that ride is so cool. There's just something about every drop, you feel like you are face to face with another attraction, some other
100%.
piece of infrastructure that you are coming very close to getting scalped by.
But I will say that's the legacy of a lot of rides, because now we're about to shift into the steel coaster section of the podcast, which would be the last section of the podcast. And of course, the vast majority, if not every single steel coaster at this park, has some sort of major interactive element with that attraction as well. Which I think is also why it's such a legendary park. It's
like
so
this isn't Cedar Point. There's no gatekeeper
stack.
ride here. There isn't some coaster that is just off on its own, not interacting with other rides.
I mean, Cedar Point, almost everything is off on its own.
I think
about it, everything's very
Gatekeeper
separated.
and Magnum are the two rides that I feel like really take off and do their own thing, and you're not even that close to any other attractions. The Blackpool Pleasure Beach, everything is interacting with something else, whether you like it or not, because that is the nature of fulfilling attraction development in a place like this.
Well, yeah, not to draw yet another parallels roller coaster tycoon, but we had like a really Spain's confined park. You would just start building like stations. You would elevate them over another ride station, and you would just like rides would just cross rides. It would get like I would almost be annoyed with the game because I had to build more to make more money or whatever. But I just hated how it looked. I don't hate how Pleasure Beach looks, but it's definitely.
I want to start with Revolution because I think that is the cardinal inspiration for your statement. Because, like, you could say you could debate whether the Schwarzkopf shuttle loop or the Aerodynamics shuttle loop was like the better ride. They're both amazing and they're both very different. And the Blackpool Pleasure Beach Aero shuttle loop it just wouldn't have been possible to do it any other way. To a normal park, you sell a ride to a park where like this, you have two stations, a forward and a backward station, and the loop, and the only part of the ride that touches the ground are just two bottom entry next to the loop. And for a normal park that's kind of random, going up the stairs and all that mess versus a Schwarzkopf shuttle loop, which is a very straightforward, you take off, you go, whatever. But an park like Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which doesn't have a lot of surface real estate to work with, this was it. This was the perfect ride. It has a custom support structure system built by, I forget the name of it, but it's some British company that specializes in train bridges that came in and provided the custom ironwork for the Revolution, for aero development for Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And like, not only is it just a great ride in its own right, but it is like a quintessential Blackpool Pleasure Beach experience, because even though you can still ride aero shuttle loops in Denver here, like 30-minute walk from my hotel, or at Frontier City in Oklahoma City, even though you can ride those rides there, and there used to be quite a few of these around across the country, especially in the United States. I don't think there was ever another one built outside of the United States besides Blackpool's. But even though you can find these in other places, this is a peak Blackpool Pleasure Beach experience because you ride this thing, it goes over the bumper cars, it goes over these kiddie rides in Nickelodeon, it goes over the Midway, it goes over a carousel, it is floating. This ride is suspended in midair, floating over other attractions, and it is just genius the way that it's incorporated with the rest of the park. And hopefully it's like going to stay there forever. I think it's about as sturdy as it gets. It's probably the sturdiest aero looper in the world because Aerodynamics did not build the superstructure for it. So it's built to last.
Yeah, the unique buttressing, it's really cool. And it's obviously also matches the park's aesthetic so well. And now that they themed it or painted it back to a more of a chromey classic look, I'm not going to lie. I know that people were really kind of obsessed with that soda tie-in that the ride had for a long time.
Iron Brew Revolution.
Yeah.
Along with the Pepsi Max Big One.
People were really kind of, for them, that was really like the aesthetic and the coloring.
With the orange.
I don't know. They have a new orange coaster that's like at the edge of the park, fits better to me than having that in the middle of the park. I think right now I just appreciate the chrome and
that
black
was one of my favorite
with
rides
with the classic maroon looking trains.
I love that ride. I love that ride.
Yeah, so we went 2 days actually.
Of either given day, it was one of my favorite. It was one of my favorite rides of the trip.
It's funny because it's actually cute to get a cute selfie on the because you have to walk all the way up and all the way down, of course, to go ride it because you have to walk to the tallest part of the ride. No, it's even no board to ride.
We're taking pictures, selfies,
which is cute. Yeah. But it reminds me of a little fun fact that could have been the Did You Know? And the Did You Know is that Blackpool is actually a sister city to Bottrop.
Oh, that's right.
Which Bottrop is the city that Movie Park Germany is located in. And lo and behold, we actually were wearing the Movie Park hoodies that I insisted on bringing on the trip because Alex said it would never get cold enough, but then it was actually cold enough and we actually wore it. And it was actually the day that we went to Blackpool and then we rolled through.
We were driving through. Well, Martin and Charlotte were driving us because they were kind enough to shuttle us to the Blackpool portion of our trip. And we were like, we saw the roadside, like sister city to Bottrop, Germany. It's like, no way.
A Movie Park hoodie. And we're like in the sister city of Bottrop. So
I'm so glad you remembered that. That's a great detail to include.
Right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of funny. So next up, we'll talk about Steeplechase because it's right next to it. The entrances are right next to each other. And that's also an ultra classic,
another
of course.
legacy aero experience.
And also a legacy,
like
if
from
you
the
don't
same
watch
exact
really
era.
Experience.
Like I'm pretty sure these coasters, the Steeplechase and the Revolution, were probably a package deal. Like they were built so close in succession to each other.
Yeah, very likely.
That I'm pretty sure one was happening and the other one was in development while the other one was happening because they were like, okay, while you're here, let's do another project.
Before I forget, we actually caught Steeplechase Valleyed with this teenage girl on it. And I felt so bad. She was on there for a minute and she was crying. Remember? They had to close the ride, and we're like, "Oh, does this mean they're going to open the third rail that we didn't get on?" They didn't mean that. But
what a tease!
They
always test the yellow side along with the other two, but they only run the yellow side on weekends or like busy days. But they will still test it with ride operators.
It wasn't busy,
and then they won't open it, and it's like,
Yeah, even if a girl gets stuck on the green track, they will not open the yellow track.
Very cool ride. Fun.
So, Steeplechase. Alexander, tell me more about it, because you're more knowledgeable about this.
It's the only other aerodynamics, aero development Steeplechase coaster ever built besides the Cycle Chase roller coaster / Wacky Soapbox Derby Racers roller coaster at Knott's Berry Farm. Knott's Berry Farms was a 4-lane version of this ride, and it opened as a motorcycle-themed ride, which is why in Roller Coaster Tycoon, you can get a motorcycle-themed ride vehicle for your steeplechase ride. That's because of Knott's Berry Farm. Even though it only ran those vehicles for like 4 years, and then for safety reasons and capacity reasons, they basically took a log-flown boat and welded it onto a chassis so they could put 4 adults, even considerably in a ride vehicle for this ride, doubled the capacity, and it was safer because you're like sitting in this boat instead of like holding on to the motorcycle. So Wacky Soapbox Derby Racers, rest in peace. What a cool ride. I regret
I'm surprised it lasts as long as it did at
ran,
Knott's
yeah,
anyway.
it was great. It ran another 15, 16, 17 years with those updated vehicles, even though it was probably all that extra weight on the ride, the wheel assembly was probably very tough on that ride. And it's a very high maintenance ride too, because you have 4 tracks. That's 4 sets of brakes, 4 sets of vehicles, and all 4 tracks at 2 lift hills. So that's 8 lift hills to maintain. Blackpool Pleasure Beach.
So do you think that they changed to those trains on Knott's Berry Farms to like the soapbox trains because people were just getting hurt on the motorcycles? Because it was, and that one's way more elevated too.
This was the 70s. I don't think it was even related to rider comfort or injury. I think it came down to capacity. I think it came down to because the motorcycles originally they were individual vehicles, the motorcycles, and then I believe they were got coupled together, and so they could dispatch them in pairs of 2, if you can picture that. And then came the Derby racer vehicles, which are also in roller coaster. Actually, every generation of aero development single rail roller coaster vehicles are rebuildable in Roller Coaster Tycoon, whether it's the short-lived motorbike coaster vehicles from Knott's Berry Farm or the long retired Derby racer boat vehicles. I think it really came down to capacity because these rides have very poor capacity. I hope Blackpool remains committed to maintaining this ride. I don't think there's a huge incentive to demolish it because it's not going to free up a lot of space, since every inch of space in the park that this ride occupies is also already occupied by other rides like Icon, Big Dipper, the Chinese Puzzle Maze, and Nickelodeon Streak. But just a very, very, very cool ride, and a really significant moment in aerodynamics' history. This park, I mean, if you love aero rides, even if you just like aero rides, if you're a Disneyland fan, if you love Disneyland, you love aerodynamics, whether you know it or not. And if you love aerodynamics,
100%. If you love classic
Disneyland, come to Blackpool Pleasure Beach and ride Alice in Wonderland, and you need to ride Revolution, and you need to ride Steeplechase. This is required reading. These are some of the most significant experiences
being a little theme park
in the history of the industry because of what aerodynamics was doing in the 70s, off of the heels of the titanic success of Disneyland and all of the rides that were being built. It makes me wish that they still had their car ride. They had an aerodynamics antique car ride that opened in 1960, which I rode in 2015. They retired it at the end of 2024. They've already demolished part of it because they're prepping the land underneath Avalanche for their next possible attraction, we think. And that was another very low capacity ride because it had the Stingray cars, which could hold at most 2 adults and at worst 2 kids, because they were very hard. You really had to like shimmy your way into the vehicle, like to fit. Like I was very skinny in 2015. Like I was very skinny, and I had a hard time fitting myself into the vehicle. So it doesn't surprise me that it was retired. It was a very cool ride with very cool, like Generation 1 Disneyland Autopia cars. Blackpool obviously still has them. All of those cars are still maintained and intact because the ride hasn't been closed for very long. Hopefully they do something cool with those. But yeah, Steeplechase is really like the crown jewel of what makes Blackpool Pleasure Beach a destination for aerodynamics fans, because that ride is just something else. It's truly terrifying.
And then next on our list is right next to Avalanche, which, even though it's of course a modern bobsled coaster, the whole Virginia Reel kind of coaster had already been around, and the whole aesthetic of a bobsled coaster with the flying turns approaches back in the 20s and 30s, if I have that timeline correct, that whole aesthetic, of course,
really
is also so appropriate for a place like. I feel like Blackpool just knew what they were doing almost every single time they did something, because when they decided to add Avalanche, and it's in between the already really classic looking Aero Looper, and all the other classic rides there, it's right next to Big Dipper Station. Like it was kind of wedged in between a bunch of classic stuff, of course, and it's just somehow worked so well. For me, they could have actually gone with maybe a different aesthetic, but of course they went with like a more like an Alps ski chalet kind of vibe, which I think is almost like stereotypical for the product line at this point. But either way, it's a good fit for the park, and the way that the layout is not spectacular. Let's make that very, very clear. The layout is not spectacular. It's very basic, and it's rumored to be on the chopping block. It's rumored to be the next thing to go, especially because all the rides below it have been like killed off, and in not so ceremonious manner. And so,
you go ahead. It's.
Can
you tell we're married?
Alexander, please
I will
proceed with your thoughts.
So this is a repeat of time. The time is repeating itself. When they were prepping for Icon, it didn't just happen overnight. That ride is huge, and it took up the space of like 5 or 6 different attractions that were all over the park, and they all closed one by one without a replacement. And then one day they announced this new coaster that was going to take place of all of these things. And it was like this light bulb moment for anybody watching. It was like, oh, that's what they're doing. Like, okay. So like the go-karts, the tumble bug, like there were so many rides, Spin Doctor, so many rides occupied that space, that Icon. And I think it's happening again. There was the original concept for Icon. Like they had originally announced that the Aero car ride was closing to accommodate Icon. And then they went with a different ride design that spared the Aero car ride, and now the car ride is gone. The convoy underneath bobsled is gone. The bumper cars next to bobsled are gone. The miniature car ride under the bobsled is gone. It's time. I think the bobsled's going to be the final nail in that coffin, and they're going to chop it, and they're going to completely level that whole section of the park and do something massive. I'm convinced. They do like one truly massive infrastructural thing like every decade with Pepsi Max or Infusion or Icon, and I think this decade's like major coaster, like skyline changing coaster experience is coming, and I think it's going to be there.
Yeah, I think so too. And if it's not a GCI, then I'll live with something else. But
maybe it's more than a GCI. I hope it's multiple what it could things.
Be, though.
I hope it's a coaster and then
could
some.
Could you imagine a racing GCI?
2 GCIs.
2 GCIs.
The Grand International.
Anyway, the Grand International, that's hilarious. I wanted to go around a giant Art Deco statue. Anyway, period slate. Next up on the list. Well, I wanted to say one thing before I move on is that I love, even though the layout for Avalanche is kind of lame, I do love that if you stand near like Wallace and Gromit or like kind of where the Big Dipper station is, that you can just see it slalom down. It's a very
just
aesthetically pleasing
layers.
little part of the ride.
It looks like a Viennetta ice cream cake.
And I guess I must mention that the fact that I thought they had renamed it because they used, I guess, have signs for every element on the ski slope, like the snake. But then I thought, but that was the only sign left on the ride. So I thought, this ride has been renamed the Snake.
Is this the Snake?
I was like, oh, is this the Snake now? And everyone's like, no, it's just the element. I was like, oh, anyway. So next on our list is what? I'm going to say the big one for last. So we'll talk about Icon because it's right next to it.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah, it's sort of next to it. Yeah. Icon. Well, Icon is a Mac launcher, which means that it's kind of forceless to launch. And the ride itself is just meandery. So we had watched videos of this for many times. And for many times, I thought the layout was kind of too meandery. Like they did a lot, but also didn't really do a lot at the same time. And so I do stand by that opinion after riding. However, there is Enzo. And Enzo saves his damn life. Because Enzo is a upgradable, upcharge edition, which is very seaside theme park of them. And you get to ride in a spinning vehicle. And if you ride on your own, which pretty much everyone does that, it's like culture now. You
it's
don't ride
recommended
else.
by
You ride
staff
your own
that you ride
vehicle.
by yourself.
Even the staff recommends you just ride by yourself, and then everyone else is waiting on a train, right? You spin like crazy, like extreme spinner level spinning, and that turns his layout into like a ball of a ride. Fantastic little ride. Yeah, so good.
I enjoy this ride even in like its vanilla state, and like because I think it's really neat the way that it interacts with so many rides, especially the Big Dipper. But Enzo took me away. Like We did it twice because it was so cool. It really,
I will say there's parts of Icon that really do kind of meander around the rides. And you have that like ditch that they dug underneath steeplechase you
yeah.
go through. There's definitely some parts. Of course, you have that interaction every ride, but I feel like that's not unique to any other ride at the park. Every ride has that. But there's definitely a couple moments on Icon where I can appreciate what they did for the park. I just don't feel like it wasn't really needed in the park's lineup. It's nice to have something very modern. I'll say that because the park is, of course, full of classic rides, and even Infusion in '08 wasn't very modern. It's a recycled SLC. I will say, I guess for that, it's nice to have a super smooth modern looper that launches and does enough that it doesn't feel like a cheap little cop out. And aesthetically speaking, it also pays homage to the park's kind of chromy, golden Art Deco eras. So all things considered, I do appreciate the ride for what it is. It's just not for me. But anyway, continue with your
I would
statement
just say
about
I
Icon.
love Icon, and I think it's a really fabulous ride. You just have to have the right expectations, and you can't be looking for a Velocicoaster experience in the main vehicles. However, if you're riding the Enzo car, you can raise your expectations a little higher. Enzo feels a bit more like it's in the time traveler ride to happiness realm of craziness. It feels a lot different than those two because the vehicles are different. It's not the same kind of vehicle. It is like they have these on Steel Taipan too at Dreamworld Gold Coast, and it's like it is a tighter, faster spin than what you would see on the extreme spinners. And just a really neat ride. I really can't say enough nice things about this ride. I don't think there's anything about it I would really change. I think there's just a lot to be said about such a substantial, massive ride, reliable, likable, with a broad appeal, with excellent rewritability. Because Blackpool can't afford to miss. Like they have to make their choices. They have to choose their expenditures very carefully. If you're going to build something that's going to take up all the space, like it has to stick the landing. And I think Icon is exactly that. I think it's exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. And having Enzo added on, I think, is a nice way to not necessarily have to build a new ride, but have a whole cute new ride experience. And for me, it just really worked. I guess if you do need to know, the listeners, that if you do go, there's not a guarantee that the Enzo train's on the track. There's 2 trains, one of which has an Enzo car on it. And for us on our second day, we were almost stressing because it took them until like 3 or 4 p.m. to
they
put the
didn't
Enzo
open
train
with
on.
the Enzo train. They added it on later.
Yeah, and they switched it in the middle of the day or towards the end of the day so that people that bought Enzo tickets at the front of the park could redeem their Enzo ride tickets, I guess, or that they could make a little bit of money on it. Because of course it does pay good. What is it, like £15 a person? Like Enzo's not cheap. Like they make good money on Enzo, so I'm sure it's in their best interest to at least run the train for a little bit every day. But it doesn't help capacity because the capacity of the ride is not very high. I think when we were there, they only run 1 train. Maybe at some point they run 2 trains. You have to just wait every other cycle for the Enzo car. But I think Enzo for me is really what made it, because Enzo for me ranks really high. It's one of the best coast experiences in the UK. So for me, that's what I'm going to focus on is Enzo. I mean, just like that snappy layout while just like spinning out of control.
Like
it's just
X2
wild. It's just so good.
Disorientation.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like a Mech Extreme spinner, except for the layout is much tighter. Because I will say the only 2 Mech Extreme spinners so far have kind of broad layouts, and there's not really any super quick tiny little elements. Maybe an airtime hill or something. But Enzo or Icon, everything it does is very tight, and it almost like spaghetti bowl Mac, where everything is very close and almost feels like they're doing too much with the space because it seems
makes me
unnecessary.
wish
Like
that
the
they put
meandering
an
I mentioned
Enzo
earlier.
car on the back of Copperhead Strike, because that's
oh my god, yeah, that would be
Copperhead
so
Strike
good.
is a ride that I feel like suffers from the same issues as Icon, where it's a likable ride, it's a crowd pleaser, everybody loves it, but it doesn't quite check the intensity box that it looks like it should. You put an Enzo car on the back of Copperhead Strike, problem solved. Fixed. Done.
Yeah, agreed.
Checks in the mail. Like it would be we would be there so quick. We would be at Carowinds so quick if they just one day they were like, oh, we put it.
Yeah, that could really convince me to come visit
so
again
quick.
soon. Yeah.
It's a great way to get more mileage out of a
So,
ride. It's already been open for like 7 years. Why not? Just do it.
100%. And to
Just
make
do
some
it.
money
Yeah.
on it. Yeah. So now let's talk about
We already kind of talked about Infusion. There isn't
Also
a whole
very
lot
excellent.
more to talk
Yeah,
about.
we mentioned it in passing. But first of all, can you remind the people where Infusion
came from Southport Pleasure Beach, which is not far from Blackpool. When they filed bankruptcy and sold off all of their rides, Blackpool snapped up Infusion, which was called Traumatizer at the time, and it fit like a glove, like a puzzle piece in this plot in between the run out for Blackpool, the big one, and the run out for the Big Dipper. Right where their aero log flume had been. They had a big giant aero log flume, like a first generation, like standard style aero log flume, which was very expensive to operate and was definitely in the sunset years. Once they decided to build Valhalla, it was kind of obvious that they were going to chuck this aero flume. They still have their other aero flume, their tiny aero flume in the Nickelodeon area. So they still have an aero flume. It's just a little baby one.
Oh my God, where all the seagulls are living? Yeah.
So the big aero flume was chucked, and they slammed that SLC in there. It is so tight, but it's amazing. It's so amazing that they were able to put that ride in there in this plot that it wasn't originally designed for.
And putting an SLC there felt a little bit strange, but it kind of works for the Parks lineup, because think about it, the Parks lineup is mostly vintage coasters. Back when Infusion was added, it's probably the most modern
Americans,
ride there.
it was like, oh my God, why would you
one.
do this? For Brits, it was that ride remains one of a kind in the United Kingdom. The standard SLC.
Well, for me, there's two things to it for me. First of all, because the Parks lineup was already so vintage, and the most modern thing at that time, if I'm not mistaken, really was just the big one, which is already vintage upon opening, really. Having a suspended looping coaster, it's a cool fit, right? Like, it is a thriller, it is a looper, that's something that all these vintage rides just don't do. And then second of all, because they took Traumatizer from a nearby beach attraction, putting it into another beachside or legacy amusement park, really felt to me like they were just paying homage to the ride.
I feel like that's
they were
why
just
they called
lifting
it
the ride from it.
They were. It was a transfusion. It was like they were taking the lifeblood of one park and putting it into Blackpool Pleasure Beach. They're fusing two parks and their experiences together. They're fusing a relatively modern ride experience with roller coasters that were developed and rides that were developed in the Roaring '20s or even the turn of the century. So,
well, the aesthetic of the ride is also kind of nice, because they did also commit to kind of doing
chrome,
like a complimentary chrome-ish look, and then having all the water effects. And like classic parks like that, having fountains and having water effects were very much a thing in the '20s. I think also part of the whole again, Art Deco movement. If you look at like anything in old Hollywood, old Los Angeles, it was all these chrome and now kind of a copper-looking water features. I think that making a giant ride themed to being practically a giant fountain that is also chrome in aesthetic is a pretty good fit for the park, and then also pays homage to like another classic seaside amusement park nearby. I think Infusion was a great fit.
It was amazing.
Just don't really discuss that matter.
It's so easy.
As enthusiasts, they're not.
It was so easy for enthusiasts to say that it was stupid, and it's like, these parks don't have that much money. We were entering a recession, a global recession. This was 2008. Like, Blackpool did not have that much money to work with. And that ride made money. That ride sold tickets to people. There are people in Great Britain who will swear up and down that it's a better ride than Nemesis. That's how much people in Great Britain like that ride. So,
is that for real though?
Yeah, I've read reviews. I've read reviews of people reading reviews saying that they liked Infusion better than Nemesis. I'm like, but you know what? Who am I to judge? Because this isn't the United States. We didn't get the Premier Parks support package at every park, within 6 hours of
Also,
a major
mainland Europe
city,
is stuffed
there is
with
one
SLCs
standard
too, though.
SLC in all of the United Kingdom, and this is it.
Yeah, fair. And then there's the big one, literally the big one, the overarching theme of the park, the one that practically touches every corner of the park and then outside the park too. And the big one, that is was the tallest coaster in the UK for how many years?
It's 235 feet tall. So it was the tallest coaster in the UK until Stealth opened.
Hyperia.
Yeah.
Oh, Stealth? No, I thought it was until Hyperia.
No, Stealth was
please hold.
Stealth
Hyperia
broke the record.
took the record. No, I'm pretty sure Hyperia. Or maybe it was the speed record?
Maybe.
I don't know. I really thought it was Hyperia took the record. Everyone,
I'm
please
looking
hold.
at it now.
Play some holding
Stealth
music.
Yeah, Stealth is only 205 feet tall, 80 miles per hour. It's definitely faster.
See? Yeah, no, I'm right. Hyperia took the record. So until Hyperia opened, the big one was the biggest, or was the tallest coaster in the UK. It's just crazy.
And I guess some of it is
because it's an aero hyper.
The big one is only 213 feet tall. The drop is longer than that, and there's some dispute. Oh no, the drop is 205. Okay, so it is actually taller. So it technically has the same drop height as Stealth, allegedly.
But the coaster is taller than Stealth.
Yes.
Anyway, so it was the tallest coaster in the UK all the way for like however many years since the Hyperia opened. And even though the ride is just like a giant mine train,
truly,
in my opinion, it is so iconic and aesthetically pleasing. You blow by the ocean and tunnels and pass all the other rides. And I did really, really love the ride. Did I have maybe slightly higher expectations? I think in hindsight, I sure did. Because I know the first drop was going to be bonkers, and the first drop was bonkers. And I do enjoy the rest of the ride, but it wasn't running particularly crazy well, which I guess wasn't expected from an aero coaster. But yeah, it doesn't do a lot on the intensity level of things. It's just a very pleasant ride, and it's just really great to just go around the park and enjoy the sights. And that's what is, for me, the best part of Big One. And I will say Big One is my favorite ride there. That's not really disputable either.
That's fair.
I guess I don't really have any negative things to say about it, except for I also cannot pretend like I like it better than Desperado, because Desperado was just like
Desperado was
Desert Beast.
Amazing. I mean, that's a great ride.
Desert Beast. Yeah, Desperado was just litty titty. So good.
I miss that ride all the time.
But I will say the Big One has that, they were playing some music for it in the station. Almost kind of gave me like Dare Millennium Force vibes, where it was like the really big, meandering.
I mean, you got to look at what
that's been
these
the legend
people,
of the park for so long. You look
at the United Kingdom, this ride was just, there was nothing even remotely like this ride. You had the ultimate at Lightwater Valley, which still beat it in length, but certainly not in height or speed. Nothing in Great Britain or even Europe was even remotely close to what this ride was accomplishing. And mainland Europe would continue to go without a coaster of that scope for quite some time, because mainland Europe wasn't really getting hypercoasters until the early 2000s. This ride was just completely in a league of its own, despite, even though it had its flaws in the context of other coasters that were opened that year. It was just completely unopposed when looked at in the context of coasters in the region. So I love that ride for what it is and for all of its weirdness. I think the older it gets, the easier it is to appreciate all of its weirdness, just like how we love Millennium Force more now, because it feels like this weird, quirky coaster with a unique, massive presence, and not, this ride that maybe it didn't live up to its full expectations. Maybe it's not everything it could have been, but it's old now. It's funny to think that those rides,
well, the nice thing
6 years apart, separating those two.
Of all the
feels like it should be longer.
Of course, there weren't many options for hypercoasters back then, and I understand that. But now, in hindsight, it also feels like this is like the perfect kind of hypercoaster for the park. Because if you would have put a B&M Hyper in here, or you would have even Slender Morgan in here, it just wouldn't have had the same feel. Come on, like if you're gonna think of Pleasure Beach and the feel and the vibes and the aesthetics, I think this is like, of course, it's like aero hyper.
Pleasure Beach
fits that
Just
idea
like
the
Cedar
most, you
Point and
know?
Disneyland, like Pleasure Beach is a quintessential aerodynamics experience, and the big one plays no small role in that. Even though Blackpool doesn't have as many aero rides as they used to, they don't have the car ride or the log flume anymore. They still have all their aero coasters, and
Well, they're by far the most aero-heavy park in all of Europe, right? Hands
absolutely,
down.
oh, by a huge margin, because most parks in Europe were not working with aero; they were working with Vekoma and Mach. Aerodynamics was providing fulfillment for Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I think because of the relationship that they had developed in the 50s and 60s, before the regional park boom had even made its way to the across the ocean, because Blackpool was doing shit like the car ride and doing shit like Alice in Wonderland, and parks in Europe were doing their own thing. They were not they weren't mining the U.S. territories for that kind of stuff, but Blackpool was, because of the kind of park that
Well,
Blackpool
yeah,
is.
because I feel like you can kind of lump in the Europe, like the UK theme park movements with the US, as where the mainland. It's so surprising to me because mainland Europe and the UK were always so interconnected anyway. Then really the mainland Europe where like steel coasters took precedence and all the attractions were German. Like the flat rides were mostly German, or like they were Intamins and whatnot. So it's so funny thinking back to how different those markets really were. And now it's really highlighted by a park like Blackpool Pleasure Beach, which is really like a timestamp with some modern
Can you think about their
additions.
log flume that they had before Infusion? You know how many other log flumes were in Europe before Blackpool built their aero flume? None. Zero.
Yeah, and then all the later
That
ones
was
were, of
it.
course,
Yeah.
all Mac. Like the ones I
Everything
wrote
that
growing
Mac
up.
rides,
The Wallaby Holland one was Mac.
everything
Hellendoorn
that
was
Vekoma
Mac.
and Mac rides would do for parks in the 70s and 80s, they weren't doing for anybody yet. Because in the 60s, you just had to, you had to call Aero or Togo or somebody,
Right.
There weren't that many companies around yet.
So funny how the times have
But
changed,
Blackpool is an aero park. It's an aero experience because Blackpool existed in the 60s. When a lot of these parks, they may have existed in the 60s, but they weren't doing what they're doing now. Even like the most quintessential vintage European park experiences like Efteling, they weren't doing rides until the 70s and 80s. A lot of these parks are the same story. And it was, there was Schwarzkopf and Mack and Vekoma and stuff. But like when Blackpool Pleasure Beach was getting creative in the 50s and 60s, finding fulfillment and finding like a company to maintain all their carousels and stuff, they were no stranger to working with Americans. And to that note, because like John Miller, who designed like all the Kennywood wooden coasters, he designed the Big Dipper. Blackpool Pleasure Beach has over 100 years of history of working with American companies, working with Philadelphia Toboggan Company on carousels and Laughing Sal and and like all that kind of stuff too. So it's really not a surprise when you look at it and think like, oh, they've been working with aerodynamics. None of the other parks in Europe did. It's like, yeah, because they've been working with America for 40 years.
Yeah, true. That's true. So yeah, overall, what are your overall thoughts of Pleasure Beach? Especially now that you've been back, you had a 10-year gap between UK visits, kind of a nice like a decade gap between visiting most of the UK parks. And now we did all the UK parks pretty much again. So what would you say is your overall feel of the placement within the UK theme park lexicon?
I
How do you
love
feel
it.
about the park overall?
I love it.
Like, is it changing for the better? Like, what
I
are
still
your
feel
thoughts
like
like
it
that?
is leaps and bounds, and not to say anything negative of the UK parks. The UK is a great place for parks, but I still feel like Blackpool Pleasure Beach is in its own league for park experiences, and it's very easy to sit back and be critical of what Blackpool does. There's a lot of decisions that they have to make, and I don't doubt that some of their decisions may not have been the right decisions in retrospect, or may have never been very popular decisions. They've made a lot of tough choices. They've done a lot of things that have really pissed people off. And it's not like we live there. It's maybe we'd feel differently if we lived in Europe, if we lived in the United Kingdom, and we're watching Blackpool on a monthly basis make their choices and go in the directions that they've chosen to go in. But from here, from America, from Florida, checking in on the park once every 10 years, I'm very happy with the position that the park is in. Every time they do something, it's a very delicate choice. And like, yeah, it sucks that the wild mouse is gone. It sucks that the aero cars are gone. But you know what? Like, the stuff that is there,
I feel like I just kind of expect stuff
I
like
still
that
feel
to
like
just
they
go
make the right
eventually,
choices.
Like
It's not like they demolished the flying machine, It's not like they demolished Big Dipper. I won't be convinced that demolishing the wild mouse was unnecessary, because I never particularly felt like the ride justified itself, because it was so violent and so genuinely like an accident waiting to happen. So like, or like the car ride, it's like, yeah, it sucks that the car ride went, but the capacity was terrible. It took up a lot of space. Like, I don't doubt that like these choices that they're making are ones that they think about very carefully and spend years deciding. And then they do some great stuff. I think Icon was the right choice for the park. They've done some great things. So I think it's just a lot easier to love the park for what it is than to sit back and be ultra skeptical about every decision they've made and complain and weep about spilt milk. It's just like, it's a theme park. It's a business. Like, they need to make money. They need to do smart decisions. They need to operate rides that are safe and attractive.
Also, if you want classic rides, this park still has a larger classic ride collection than any other park in Europe. So, I don't really understand people are upset about that. Yeah. But either way, my overall experience of the park, compared to all the other UK parks, is that it does kind of stand out, mostly because it's so aesthetically cohesive and vintage, and it feels like a lot of love is in the park. I just feel like the people running the park, and I don't know them personally. I don't know anything about management company really, but for me, it really does feel like there's a heart in the place, and it's been taken care of like that. Like, it doesn't feel. It almost feels like there's a culture surrounding it, and it's where I felt like the Merlin parks were like overly corporate, and the corporate sloppiness has just destroyed my idea of those parks. I just feel like they're nickel and diming. They don't care about the aesthetic. They don't care as much about operations. I just felt like going to the Merlin parks was almost like a disappointing way to spend your money, because you just know that all that it's really there for is just for them to make money off of you. And I feel like when you go to Pleasure Beach, it almost feels like it's a museum. Like, there's so much love for it. And Blackpool as a whole is super classy. If you look at the old Blackpool Tower, like all that stuff, like all the piers, like Blackpool is of course like a super old, like centennial old bath place, like a beach town, and of course you can sense that. And the park itself just feels very much respected, almost like a museum, and that vibe just beats some of the other vibes at the UK parks for me. So for me, it just ranks really high, because of course, as enthusiasts, you're going to look at the bigger parks, right? You're going to look at Thorpe, you're going to look at Alton Towers, you're going to look at Blackpool, and I would say maybe those are definitely the big three, and unless I'm missing one, but that's like the big three, right now?
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree? Yeah. So, and then for me, it's very easy, very, very easy to put Blackpool on top. Very easy. And then surprisingly, probably put Thorpe second, because it was surprisingly a lot better than I expected. And then even though I wanted to love Alton the most, and it has the most potential by far, Alton could by far be even the best park in Europe if they just put the money effort into it. Unfortunately, that is also the sloppiest of the parks in the UK right now, in my opinion, is Alton Towers. So having said that, my opinion of it is that we went there between Alton Towers and Thorpe, and it was a good place to be after Alton Towers, because I was actually very excited to be there. It's where Alton Towers, even though we did like 3 days at Alton Towers, it really felt like I was just happy that there was a park that actually felt really loved by locals and management alike, if that makes sense. And hopefully I'm not misremembering anything. I
completely agree.
Yeah. And with that, I think we're at a decent stopping point for this episode. Do you have anything else you want to add to this?
It's perfect. Yeah.
No? Cool. Well, then I want to remind everyone that this is season 6 of Coast to Kings Radio, and we have a lot of cool episodes out. We're talking about California's Good America and whether or not we think there's actually secretly a future for the park. Listen to that episode. We just did a Cedar Point episode last week. This, of course, is part of the Great British Road Trip, so check out all of our Great British Road Trip episodes. Everyone seems to love our Alton Towers one, maybe because we're just like super hard and real on that episode, and maybe the British are catching on with our disdain for the way the park is managed. So maybe that's a cute one to check out for you if you're into the UK theme parks, and maybe you're from the UK yourself. We thank you so much for listening. We'd appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on both Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you find yourself listening. And we'll get you guys hopefully next week We are traveling again for work and vacation, but I'm hoping we can squeeze that episode in for next week. All right, guys.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.